So yeah, welcome to Liquid Staking Working Group call number 8. So today Felix is going to present the research report, the first draft of the research report. So we'll focus on that today. So yeah, Felix, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so hi guys, to those that are here and those that are gonna watch this later, hopefully. So can you see my screen? I'm sharing already.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So basically what this call is supposed to be about is there's some weird number in here, I don't know why. Anyway, and so the idea is we're going to walk through the research paper draft that we wrote up in the past few weeks, like following the whole presentations from the working group members, and that was mainly written by like members from Chorus One team. Like there's already been some feedback from other people. We put it out last Friday. So now in this call, I just want to quickly kind of go through the high level what we wrote about, and then maybe at the end we can either discuss a few things, get some feedback, do some questions, or look at like more specific at the particular implementations and how we kind of where we see the strength, the weaknesses, and so on. So yeah, with that said, let me start to the agenda, right? So we start with the basic idea. Why is liquid staking something that's needed, right? The protocol restrictions in proof of stake and the associated costs with them. So that's mainly the unbonding period. The paper actually starts with like a little bit of background on proof of work, proof of stake, but we're gonna start this call here because I think most of the people that are in this group actually know the backgrounds already well enough. Then there's a bigger section around like exchange staking. What is the trajectory? What is possible in staking protocols if you have custody over the user assets, and why is that a better user experience? And then also the kind of current examples, what is already happening there. And we go into liquid staking. So that's the on-chain tokenization of staking positions, and introduce our taxonomy, go a bit into risks and benefits we see, or we like summarized from also discussions that we had over time about this. Then we go into like what would an ideal like liquid staking solution look like? What are the characteristics we are looking for? So, and finally, that's kind of the place where maybe we'll see how this goes. That would be where we evaluate like the implementations, kind of presenting how they currently work, and maybe what are the strengths and weaknesses we see. Okay, cool. So let's get started with the protocol restrictions, right? So first of all, like as many know in proof of stake, when you start to stake your tokens, you put them in some kind of smart contract that kind of says, okay, this token belongs to this guy and he's now staking with this validator. That while doing that, you basically these tokens are locked in this kind of escrow, and you are participating, your stake is participating actively in consensus, and you earn rewards and the slashings associated with the validator, right? Then when you want to like exit your staking position, usually what happens is you issue this withdrawal transaction. So this is here. And then there is a period that is enforced by the protocol, like some kind of withdrawal delay that is needed because of multiple reasons. One of them being that if there is like a misbehavior from validator that was caught like after it happened, and the evidence is only presented on chain later, then this can happen in the unbonding periods. There's other reasons too. For example, like how often does a light client need to connect to the network to be sure he's on the right chain, and also potentially if we would enforce correlated slashing, so that means like slash people accordingly to how much other stake has equivocated, then this would also probably happen within the unbonding period. Is useful for that, to kind of hold the stake in escrow so that people can get slashed for that. So these two things are like the important restrictions. And now we have been thinking a lot about how can we actually calculate these costs more or less, or how would you estimate these costs, right? So first of all, when you unbond, right, you probably want to, when you do the unbonding, ideally you would want to liquidate your stake position, right? You would want to have like cash for for whatever you were staking and be able to sell it. Maybe there is like some bull run or whatever. Let's say here there was some price increase in Atom, and at this point I decided to withdraw. Ideally, I wanted to withdraw here because maybe I think, yeah, I want to sell it, right? So the problem now is there's this unbonding period of 21 days where I'm kind of exposed to this volatility. So this is like example chart of how Atom price might move within this time, and only when the stake is released, right, you get some price that you have no really knowledge about before when you do the withdrawal. So the idea is here, if you think about it, right, ideally what you would want to do is maybe there's some futures market or something that I can sell my unbonding atoms at this time. So I get like some money and can then sell them to some guy that buys them here. Right now, there's no kind of forward or futures market for this that I know of, or probably like maybe really small, right? OTC type thing. And another idea would be, okay, if liquid staking, if staking risk something exists, you could just sell your staking position at this point to someone else, right? That we're gonna get to that a bit later, but those are like two options. But using those, we cannot really like calculate right now what is actually the cost of these 21 days. So we took a bit of a different approach in that we said, here, if you issue this withdrawal transaction, what you could potentially do is take a short position on Atom, exactly the size of your unbonding tokens, so that basically you are mirroring, because you're in the usual network, you're still long the Atom price for this unbonding period. But so if you take like a short position of the exact opposite kind of, you get like this neutral position, right? So no matter where the price moves, you get exactly what the price of atoms that you had in the time you sent the withdrawal transaction. And now there are ways. So basically, you can neutralize this atom volatility by doing this short position. Now, to do this, we basically came up with this term unbonding premium, right? That's kind of the cost of what this unbonding premium represents. So the way we calculate it is one thing is the capital cost to neutralize that volatility. That means I have to put up collateral to borrow the atom for the short position. I have to kind of pay the borrowing rate on my short position, and I have to pay the interest of the borrowed tokens, the collateral that I was putting up in this case. Also, the other dimension is kind of this opportunity cost, right? If I do that, I cannot use my collateral that I put up to borrow, put it in, like supply it to compound or whatever. I cannot earn this interest. And also the atoms that are actually unbonding in this period, right? They also don't earn interest. So there's also opportunity cost there, right? If there would be some other, like a compound type market for atoms, I could also supply them there and earn some other interest during this unbonding period. And then finally, there's this cost of illiquidity. I call it, basically the idea being, right, at the time I wanted to withdraw, I actually cannot liquidate the stake right away. I still need to wait the 21 days until I actually get the cash or can get the cash. So that means there is also cost that is associated with this. Right now, we're not really calculating this because not really clear how to actually do this. So we're focusing on this opportunity cost and the capital cost. Now, this is some example, like it uses a lot of assumptions, first of all. So for example, in this example, we unbond 1,000 atom. We have a $2 per atom price that kind of is constant over time in our assumption. And we have 8% assumed rewards, blending and borrowing rate for atoms. So here I kind of assume all these different types of using your atom actually have the same rates, which might not be realistic in theory. So there's no really data on this. I'm kind of just using this because we had some discussions essentially, where could this borrowing rate for atoms be realistically? And many people like Maron and Brian included are more of the opinion, probably it's higher actually than the staking reward, because staking is kind of more risk-free. On the other hand, you wouldn't have this unbonding period when borrowing, right? You can always take your money out of the money market or put it back in. So not sure exactly. We will have to see how that plays out. So for right now, we assume these 8%. Then to actually do this short position and borrow atoms from somewhere, you usually currently in DeFi apps, you usually have to over collateralize the position. So here we're using like 150%. We're using USD essentially, or DAI, whatever you want, to do that for the collateral. So that would be 3,000. So 150% of the 2,000 atom position. And then basically what these 3,000, you also have to pay, because you have to pay, you have the opportunity cost of not being able to lend these 3,000 at the lending rate. And you also, if you don't have this collateral, if you would need to borrow that too, right? That's also associated with a cost. Like I'm using here 2% and 4% respectively. This kind of data from defirate.com. So that's like the 30-day average for DAI across like Aave and some other DeFi protocols currently on Ethereum. So if you do that, right, you can kind of calculate the capital cost first, which is basically, I have my atom position $2,000 in this case. I need to borrow like the same amount of atom at this 8% rate for the time of the unbonding period. And I also need to, I'm also borrowing the collateral that I need to borrow the atom for shorting. And to do this, that's like basically for our 2,000 position is $16.11. Then the opportunity cost is calculated basically as I have this $2,000 atom position, right? I could also put it in this compound market that we just assume exists, right? So let's say this is this 8% here. So, so you could have earned this much, this $9.21, if you would have supplied the same amount of atom to this market. And also you have the collateral. You could also, the $3,000 USD, you could have put this in some lending protocol and earned like the 2% over this period. So this adds up to be this much. And finally, like we added up, it's $28.07 basically. And essentially the core outcome here is it's as a percentage of your initial position is kind of 1.4% on this specific Cosmos example with the assumptions we made, right? So what can be expected is it's probably right between 0.5 and 2% more or less. It really depends a lot on how big are these rates in practice, and also how long is the unbonding period for the given protocol. So, okay, I mean, maybe I can pause a little bit if there's any questions already here from someone on the call. Okay, we'll assume that's fine, and then go towards the next thing. So the section, once we establish this, okay, there's kind of cost to unbonding. Now, the big thing we are seeing, or we see as a threat to proof of stake in general, or to this whole thing, is there are these custodial exchanges, right? They can do a lot of things that much easier than some non-custodial staking providers might be able to do. So, for example, with respect to staking, you are able to a little bit abstract the protocol restrictions from your users by kind of pooling their assets together. So I'll kind of explain what we mean by that using this beautiful diagram here. So the idea is, right, an account on a blockchain looks the same. From the blockchain perspective, it doesn't matter if it's an exchange or if it's my account or Brenton's. It's just probably the exchange account has more funds on it, hopefully. And then what the exchange can do is basically, you have these two accounts potentially, or likely more, and you can kind of manage the liquidity in between these accounts and only delegate from one of these accounts, like the portion to the validator, and then share these staking rewards with the users that deposit tokens on your exchange. So essentially, you can just credit them in your internal database with like some portion of the rewards, and when they want to withdraw, you actually get them the tokens, right? Now, the interesting thing here being that while the users are on your platform and on the exchange, they are able to use these tokens on the exchange without regard for the actual the protocol restrictions that are there. Only when they want to like leave the platform, really, the restrictions come back into play. And even then, usually because you're pooling assets together, you can expect that not everyone would kind of exit their position at the same time. So you're able to serve people that want to withdraw their tokens from the platform without having to go through this unbonding period as an exchange. Now, that's not all, like, right, on the platform, they can actually trade these tokens with other users on the platform. So essentially you have kind of liquid staking already on the exchange, right? I can trade my atom with another user and still earn staking rewards while I do that. And it's only in the exchange's database, basically, where the change is recorded of who's the owner. And the on-chain, it's still the exchange account that's owning it, right? And then the second part is actually an even bigger thing where you can, exchanges now start to offer kind of more services than just this trading, right? So there's a lot of margin products, or also kind of exchange lending products that are there. And these tokens can also be used in these products. So essentially, they can already be used as collateral in these kind of financial applications on the exchanges, but not if you're staking non-custodially. So that's one big thing that liquid staking is trying to address. I will also get to that. So yeah, was just an overview of like what is in theory can the exchange do. And then the report also goes a bit into what is actually happening in practice. So we do have already multiple exchanges doing staking or offering staking to their customers. So far, it's not too much, but for example, Binance has a lot of validators running already. They do this kind of snapshot thing where basically they stake the tokens that customers deposit in staking, and then make snapshots of the user balances every day and distribute the rewards that they earn accordingly. And also on Binance, because they have these margin trading and lending on their platforms, you can use these tokens there too, right? That's kind of back to the point that I just made. And what's also interesting in Binance, actually, they also run this validator on Cosmos, for example. They also, their validator actually accepts also delegations for people that are not on the platform for a low fee. And I guess one point that is also important to note is that, exchanges can also offer this kind of staking very easily, or like at a low cost compared to other staking providers, because obviously their income comes from other streams. So for example, the trading or these margin products. And then another example is Coinbase. So far, Coinbase is also only offering this for Tezos, where they actually post the slashable bond in Tezos themselves. But they're also announced that they, for example, want to add Polkadot too. And on Coinbase charges normal 25% commission rate. So essentially the Coinbase offering is not much different from really normal staking right now. They or at least as far as I understood it, they don't really make use of these trading while staking and using in other products benefits so far. On Kraken, it's also only Tezos so far. They have plans to add Cosmos and Dash. There's explicitly no trading while you stake, but you can actually use the Tezos on your account also for margin trading. So there's a 50% haircut on that. So that's potentially there. So that's like my interpretation, that this haircut is there because maybe they want to cover like the slashing in Tezos with these funds, or potentially also they are just using their own insurance fund to cover those, right? Binance, for example, has the SAFU fund and so on. Coinbase also insured, probably Kraken too. I'm actually not that aware. And then finally, Bitfinex recently also launched Cosmos, EOS, Tezos, V Systems, and plans to add Algorand and Tron. And they explicitly describe this kind of fractional staking they do that I mentioned before. So basically this liquidity management between these accounts, right? If some user wants to withdraw, you can basically serve them out of your portion of liquid supply. Even if there's like, let's say a bank run, everyone wants to draw, then they would just need to wait the unbonding period, what you would normally already need to do in non-custodial staking always. So all that together brings us to this this point of liquid staking, right? What is liquid staking? What we're saying is liquid staking basically tries to achieve similar things in this non-custodial decentralized context. So what that means is liquid staking is kind of this on-chain like tokenization of staking positions and enabling staking assets to be used in decentralized finance applications and to be traded. And then in the report, we kind of come up with this taxonomy of where we assign different implementations to. So these different types are native, non-native, synthetic, and custodial. The idea being we kind of try to separate it a bit to account for some of the differences in the implementation. So for example, native is really if the liquid staking, also the tokenization, is part of the core protocol design, meaning actually the staking protocol does issue these representations and there's no like secondary smart contract or other thing needed to do this. That's then non-native, right? That means here there is actually another trustless on-chain protocol that is in charge of the stake assets and issuing these tokenized claims. So that can be a smart contract if it's like a smart contract chain, right, on Ethereum or wherever. You could build a smart contract that does this. There's also other approaches, for example, where in Cosmos, where another zone, so another blockchain might control an account on the staking network via IBC. And also there are other like more advanced moon math crypto things you could do that help you do this by, like, for example, doing like multi-party computation and sharing keys with a lot of people that actually hold this collateral for the liquid staking tokens. And this is basically the biggest category, probably. Like there's a lot of implementations already there. There's more and more coming by the minute, basically, and a lot of ideas around, and we'll have to see, especially if smart contract chains go live, how it will actually develop. Then the main native one, I guess we might come back to the implementations, but here you can see the examples. The synthetic type of liquid staking is basically something else where really the whole actual staking protocol is abstracted away from the liquid staking, from the tokenized stake, where it's really just actually an agreement between two or more parties that basically say we want to like exchange the cash flows associated with staked assets. So this is kind of similar to an interest rate swap, maybe in traditional finance, where maybe I say, here I will pay you the staking rewards because that's all on chain, right? We kind of know the percentages, what the interest on staking assets is. I could say, here I put up this collateral, I will pay you the staking rewards and you pay me some fixed rate, right? You pay me like Libor rate. And maybe this deal could exist on chain, obviously, like using protocols like Huma or synthetics or whatever. And the idea here being like, who would use this? Maybe this is something, right, a validator might want to use, so to like hedge his cash flows, so to be not so exposed to the staking assets, volatility, and changes in reward rate and so on. Then finally, the final one is kind of a custodial. It's a bit of a mixed thing. So we take this in here too, to signify there's also like approaches to kind of tokenize these staking rewards with some custodial elements. So that's the main example here being StakerDAO. Maybe we will actually get to discuss this a bit more, but here basically there's some portion of the whole thing on chain, but most of it is actually not trustless, and you kind of trusting people to really sell their asset and do this buyback and burn in the StakerDAO case and so on. So this is like a regulated solution that one might also take to liquid staking. Okay. Now in a draft or a paper, generally we discuss kind of risks and benefits of liquid staking. There are a bunch of categories. I think I will just kind of go over it on a high level, what we found. So benefits obviously being this, I can use my staking assets as collateral in DeFi applications, right? that means instead of just earning my staking rewards, I could also like lend them on Compound and so on. I can also improve the liquidity of staked assets, meaning I can actually, as a staker, could, instead of having to wait these 21 days, I can instantly sell my staking position and get liquidity on it. Then another benefit is once you have this tokenized stake, it opens up a lot of space for permissionless innovation and for advanced financial products, I call it. So if you bundle these kind of liquid tokens together with other DeFi things, you can build various products that might like change your risk exposure, make some attractive structured products. So that could be like I combine a lot of different staking assets together in like an index. So it could be like diversified across validators and also across networks, and it's just one token that I need to hold to kind of incorporate all that. That is all possible if you have this kind of tokenized stake and can move it across chain. Obviously, that's kind of also one prerequisite for that. Or another option might be I combine this liquid staking token with some kind of put option token from Open or whatever on the underlying assets, and I might be able to create some kind of almost fixed income product doing that. I guess there's a lot of things around that. I mean, if anyone has any ideas, please let us know. But the core idea being, it does help you to create these kind of things if you have tokenized stake somewhere. Then finally, or another point is kind of this, it improves the price discovery for staking assets, meaning if I can trade this, there's like liquid market around that I can, the market can better price these assets. So this is like a classical argument for derivatives in traditional finance, but that also applies obviously here. And finally, there's kind of maybe not the truest thing. It improves the user experience of staking potentially. Like there's also kind of the counter argument that it makes it worse, but for some extent you could say, right, if I just need to hold one token and I'm diversified across different networks, I don't need to like send reward claim transactions on these networks. I don't need to do all these kind of staking maintenance transactions. Then it's really a much better user experience and will probably lead to more people using staking assets. On the other hand, right, like current wallet implementations might be broken through this, and it gives you new challenges how to incorporate this in some kind of user-facing interfaces. Then on the other side of liquid staking, which is probably the more important one, are the risks associated with it. So there's probably a lot to be said here. The main thing we see is kind of this systemic risk. So just right, like there's more complexity. You now have these assets somewhere in your DeFi protocols. Anything that goes wrong might be able to like lead to some cascading failure if you're not careful. Really, the point here being that why it's different from what we already have in the financial world right now is that it's kind of more transparent, right? As everything is over collateralized, collateral is actually there, and it should be easier to kind of figure out where these risks are and deal with them. And also another point that Brian had made is that, right, there's no institution to bail you out if it fails, right? There's no government printing money for you if your bank or whatever goes bankrupt, right? Your liquid staking solution in this case. Then another big risk is clearly if these liquid staking solutions exist, or also if they don't exist, there's a risk of stake centralization with the issuers of these tokens. So for example, if it's on an exchange, right, there's a risk that the exchange basically controls all the staking. That's already a problem potentially right now, and will remain a problem. But it could also be a risk, right, if there's liquid staking on some other chain or some specific smart contract governed thing, and that becomes really popular, then that thing is basically controlling your protocol. So there's a real problem there, and how to deal with it. It really depends. Maybe it's good if there's competition between different solutions, but at the same time, this market is better. Like the liquid staking is better the more liquid it is, the bigger it is. So there is a real risk about this here. Finally, there's two other things. So one big risk is for protocols with governance, liquid staking might actually, like, because the stake assets might move to another chain, or like remove the user even more from this network, that that has impact on like the on-chain voting process. So there's a big discussion of this. I will not go into this right now, but there's a big part on this in the paper, and why we think it should actually be fine. And then the other part is more around kind of, does having these kind of instruments and stake derivatives in general introduce perverse or impact validator incentives? So how does it change the whole game theoretic approach to validators in proof of stake? The idea here being, right, maybe as a validator, if I have this liquid staking solution, I can short myself and double sign and gain from that. In the end, we kind of go through this in the paper. I will also not cover this too much, but the idea being this attack is not really that realistic potentially, and should also be like uncoverable. And especially if validators are like known entities, this is really not really a risk, because then they also have to face legal consequences, right? Okay, so these are like risks and benefits, is one of the bigger sections there. And from this discussion, basically we came up with like, how should a liquid staking position look like? What are like desired characteristics for liquid staking? And then we came up with these eight different points that you would like to have for your ideal liquid staking solution. So that's first of all liquidity. So as the name already suggests, right? I'm able to exit my staking position at any time without incurring significant discounts or having to wait or whatever. So that means here, instead of having this 21 days and having to jump through a lot of hoops to kind of get the liquidity, I can just sell my tokenized stake to someone and get the cash. Fungibility being the liquid staking solution ideally would minimize the fragmentation of liquidity across. So like what we try to say here is, right, it shouldn't be that there's like too many different tokens and none of them gets liquid, so that actually the fungibility and liquidity is kind of connected, right? If there's too many different tokens, probably none of them will be really liquid, so anyone will need to endure like significant discounts if you actually want to sell them on the market, if the market is very thinly traded. So ideally a good solution would kind of minimize this. The other point that we saw in that some solutions that is this problem sometimes is that this value divisibility, so that's shout out to Everett for coming up with that term, is this ability to partially trade or sell your safe position. So I don't have to sell my whole account or something. I can maybe sell just one atom out of the 500 I want to by like just selling a portion of my tokenized stake or something. Then there are some things that are more related to like network operations, so decentralization friendly, non-subjective to network security, non-subjective to governance. So that's really like, ideally the solution wouldn't impact these things, how the networks work, or at least not make them much worse. And then finally, points about using in DeFi, so this composability, right? If we have tokenized stake, then this can become a money Lego block for DeFi innovation. So an ideal solution would have this feature, and it should be quite flexible, so that also other DeFi applications would actually want to use this tokenized stake. And then the final thing is about this visibility of all protocol functions, parity as a collateral. So this is basically the idea. I should know what collateral is in this solution, how does it work, what are like the parameters that they set, like over collateralization ratio and so on, so that anyone observing the whole thing can get an idea of how risky this is and so on. Okay. Yeah, so maybe up to here, I think that's like the main contribution of our report, aside from the evaluation. So I think so far what I discussed or talked through is kind of how do you calculate the cost associated with this unbonding period, why exchanges can abstract these restrictions from their users, and also allow the use of stake tokens as collateral on their platform, leading to vastly superior UX. We also discussed quickly in the liquid staking the definition of it and our taxonomy and the kind of risks, benefits, and desired characteristics. So that's also the structure of the paper. And in the end, we kind of go into each currently proposed implementation, quickly explaining how it works, and get like talking a bit about the key strengths and weaknesses. So now for this call, I'm not sure. I thought maybe we pause here if there's like questions or feedback of what we forgot, what we should include or anything. And then maybe if there's not, or if people still want, we can go through like the implementations a bit more in detail and discuss those again. So yeah, I'll pause there for a second.
Well, Felix, well, thank you very much as usual. I particularly like the fact that you already mentioned a sort of like composability, modularity of the financial product, because that's what it's going to be, in terms of like you can use it as a component of a structured product, and you need to look at who is going to be trading it, who is going to be pricing it. So, you know, on my personal point of view, it's very important, because yes, it's something that I would say the industry needs, but the fact that it could be also used from other actors in general, it's very important, because it means liquidity, right? It means that more people use it, more people need it, and more people can actually take advantage of it. It could be hedging, it could be insurance, it could be, as you said, structured products, anything. But I would say the more you could do with that, obviously the better. So I really like that sort of approach so far.
Yeah, thanks so much. Anyone else have any comments so far? So also, yeah, maybe I think we should, I will link again, or maybe someone from the team can link again the draft. I guess anyone on this call already probably saw it, but just again, so if you want to read it, leave your feedback there. It's very welcome. We're still like finalizing it, especially kind of the final evaluations of the projects. I already saw, for example, Christian, who's also on this call from StakerDAO, he gave some comments about how we described the protocol. So that's very helpful for us if there's something wrong, because in the end, we're going to publish this like more publicly, right? And we don't want to have like wrong facts about specific implementations in there. Yeah. I think there's probably someone sent a draft. Yeah, so if there's no one else that has like some comments or ideas or wants to share something, I guess, I don't know, Brian, let me know. We could kind of go through a bit again through the actual implementations. And I would actually just kind of explain how we describe them, and then we can discuss them maybe again one by one.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. So yeah, again, maybe let's start from like complexity level increasing. So the first thing we kind of take a look at is this delegation exchange that Jung from bHarvest, or like bHarvest actually, championed or came up with during the Berlin hackathon last September, I think, or June, I don't know, one of the two. That is basically a very basic thing that actually doesn't really tokenize the stake. So it's not really a liquid staking solution, but we chose to include it because it allows you to trade these delegations. So here, what's really happening is kind of through the use of subkeys or like group accounts on Cosmos, there would be the ability to trade the delegations between users in kind of like a OTC, more OTC-like market, where you basically would have to sell your whole delegation to someone, that is kind of the first thing we look at, as it obviously has, actually I should also open up the key strengths and weaknesses to know what we said here. I think the main thing here, right, is it doesn't actually tokenize stake, so you can't use it as collateral. It has, but it's very nice. It doesn't really impact the protocol too much. And it is really trustless in a way. It could be working relatively quickly, at least on Cosmos. And the problem, being more around, okay, it doesn't allow all this composability because there's no tokenized stake. It doesn't help you with this reusage problem. And there's also difficult to build liquidity in this market because it's pretty hard to have this value divisibility between users. So maybe, on each solution, if someone, I'll leave like a few seconds, if someone wants to comment on something, what he's seeing there, or if those people that read the article disagree with something, please do so. Okay, then I will just go on to like the delegation vouchers. So delegation vouchers was also trying to solve the same problem. We worked on this with Sunny or Sika and Dave, right? On also at the same hackathon that bHarvest presented their delegation exchange. So delegation vouchers is essentially like a different kind of staking protocol that has these kind of pools that you deposit your stake in, and that pool is then the one that actually does the delegation in the protocol and accumulates the staking rewards and the slashings. And there is a token for this pool that the token is basically the tokenized claim of what is in the pool for the holder of these tokens, and you can redeem it at any time to get your share of what's in the pool. So essentially there is a type of exchange rate between the actual staked assets and this voucher tokens that the pool tracks, and by kind of redeeming these tokens with the pool, you're able to then extract or withdraw the actual staked assets. And this token, the voucher token, you could then take anywhere you want. You can use it in DeFi and so on. It has this design. There's different variations then when it gets more into like actual how it actually looks. There was two like variations, one from us with like an auction for fee tokens, and another specification from Sunny that he also presented on this call on one of the liquid staking working group calls, where there's some other solution of especially how you handle multiple fee tokens in this kind of model. I guess what is really interesting about delegation vouchers is that they are kind of easy to reason about. You can build this on many protocols, I would say, and you can actually build it like straight into the protocol, right? So it could be like a native solution. And the problem with it is that every validator would have like his own pool. So there's like fragmentation of liquidity in that sense. And you wouldn't have to build this, the more liquid or something to bundle liquidity on top. So potentially you could build like indexes or something, right? Like ETF-like structure where maybe you bundle a lot of these tokens together in some other index token. Any comments from anyone on this or questions?
I mean, just one thing, I think it would be interesting at some point in this call, maybe towards the end, to have a little bit of a discussion of what people's thinking is currently of like, in general, is it better to have the stuff natively integrated without a business model? Or is it better to kind of like, have people build maybe various competing solutions on top that maybe interject their own tokens? Maybe we can go through some more examples and then kind of discuss that point a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so yeah, that's, I guess, one of the easiest. Now it gets more to the non-native implementations where usually it's kind of like a smart contract or some other blockchain that controls the staking assets in the end. So I think I'm starting with, Stake Capital DAO. So this is also a design that is very much in flux, I feel like, but it's interesting because it's on Ethereum. So it could already use the DeFi ecosystem that is there. So essentially Stake Capital, what it is kind of a DAO on Ethereum that pools assets with its users and then stakes at this point only with ERC20 staking protocols. So that's New Cypher, LivePeer, I guess maybe potentially Matic and some of these other scale that are using Ethereum for their staking logic. So Stake Capital DAO is kind of a contract on Ethereum that then allocates the stake to these protocols on Ethereum. So that's pretty straightforward. You don't need like IBC or anything. The DAO has kind of a way to choose the validators that validate the stake. So that's the DAO decision making, right? And there is also this issuance. Actually, wait, maybe first, there's also the DAO is united under this token, the SCT token, that is paid out to people staking with Stake Capital currently, and also potentially in other ways in the future where they would earn like a percentage of the fees generated by these Stake Capital validators that goes back to these token holders, the SCT token holders. So it probably helps to read this up. They also have a light paper that is quite nice to read. But the liquid staking portion of this design is essentially similar to the Y tokens, if people know about this, where essentially there are for each asset different pools with different maturities. So saying, for example, okay, on 31st of December 2021, this stake will mature, and then assets that are like deposited into this kind of contract get like their own L token, which is also a claim that represents whatever is in that contract at the end of the maturity period where the stake is unlocked. So essentially the contract will make sure that staking or like unbound at the right time, that once this specific token pool matures, that all the assets are accessible. And because you know what will be in there at the end of the maturity, the token that represents that can have like a price, which is kind of like a yield curve in the yield token, or in the traditional financial world, where it is kind of it is possible to reason about how you should price that. So that's a kind of interesting design. I hope I kind of had made a good explanation here. Any comments on this design or questions that people have? Okay, then let's, I guess, move to Everett, which also like a Cosmos specific design, or kind of, it is agnostic of the protocol, but it is started on Cosmos from the Cosmos perspective, and it makes use of IBC. So the idea here being there is a separate blockchain that controls accounts on other proof of stake networks. And by depositing into these accounts on the specific network that you want the liquid staking token to be on, you can kind of open these over collateralized positions, liquid staking positions, and receive a synthetic stake token back while doing that. I'm always making the analogy to Maker, which Brendan doesn't like, but I kind of stick with it. So the idea being here, there are people that issue these synthetic stake tokens, and those are then very liquid because essentially the protocol enables or requires you to over collateralize your position. So for example, on Cosmos, you would need to deposit like 110% of what you want to stake as collateral, so that in case of slashing, which is currently maximum 5% on Cosmos, that could be covered from your collateral. And yeah, that synthetic stake token, then it's kind of assumed that should be like pegged to the underlying asset. We still not entirely clear how this peg might hold, but essentially because it's just one type of token, it is really fungible. It's very divisible, and it could like really get a lot of liquidity. So that's the interesting thing here. Yeah, if anyone has any comments, please. I think that's so far from what I would say about this. I think the issue here being also, right, it's a separate blockchain. So essentially, if a lot of assets would move here, it could come the situation where this small blockchain is kind of controlling a lot of stake on some other chain. So there might be some security issues. Also, the people that issue these tokens, they are actually the ones that remain in control of this governance power. So it's also not clear who are these actors and does this actually change the protocol a lot. But yeah, as I said, they're really fungible, and this synthetic stake token could be really liquid if it works out the way they imagine it. Yeah. Okay, then I guess we can move on to the, I guess, another interesting design that is Stuffy, which didn't present, but it's very different from other designs because it's making use of this multi-party computation cryptography, where essentially also similar to the interchain accounts, where some account on the proof of stake blockchain is owned by this kind of special validators on the Stuffy blockchain, which all hold like share keys of these specific accounts, and by depositing users depositing funds into this account that's owned by this different validators, they issue you an NFT for whatever you staked that represents the claim on that. And these validators then share the key. They need to be online if you come back, that they can unbond your stake and so on. So there's a complex like protocol how to rotate these validators, how to make sure they don't cheat and so on. I guess Brent is actually the most expert in this design. I kind of only looked at it a bit, but that's essentially how it works. Problem here being, okay, it's again another blockchain. It's kind of it also has this thing that it works anywhere, right? Like this MPC account, you could work on any blockchain. It doesn't require this IBC connection really. The problem here being also, again, if this whole token, if there's a lot of funds in these accounts controlled by this chain, and this is secured by like little funds, or these validators have little stake or skin in the game, then it could be a security issue. And there's also like obviously a kind of risk that these nodes collude and kind of steal the funds that were put into this account. And also the biggest one potentially is that there are only these NFTs, so meaning that every staking position is not fungible with others, so it would probably have a really hard time to really get liquidity.
On Stuffy, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, is this the last design that they had? Because they had a lot of different designs, and when I discussed with them, they were onto something a little bit different.
Yeah, that could very well be. I mean, I think we just took it from their official documentation, and Brenton talked a bit with the guy. But obviously, yeah, that's a problem with a lot of these designs. They're constantly evolving below us while we write this. So it might be that it's not true, right? That's why we also wanted the teams to kind of make changes or comments before we publish this.
All right. Well, basically, the last discussions that I had with them, it wasn't NFTs, and they were using their substrate chain and issuing the assets on Ethereum. So at the end of the day, it seemed to be like ERC20s, which were issued directly on Ethereum.
Okay, yeah, I mean, probably we should talk with them again and fix these then. Yeah, that was like, I mean, the last thing we know. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's about 8 weeks ago when we reviewed their docs with them. So yeah, we'll check in with them and see where they are.
Yeah. Anyone else comment on this? I guess here it's kind of interesting to think about what happens if you use these advanced cryptographic tools to do this kind of thing, and that this also can't really be like forbidden or anything, right? This kind of controlling account from somewhere else, you can't really tell, which has like really interesting implications, I think. Yeah, okay, and then the final model, which is probably the most like a super interesting one, right? It's a very regulated one, custodial one, also kind of complex one, where this graphic right now is actually a bit wrong. I think Christian corrected me. I didn't have the time yet to like correct it, but essentially they presented also 2 weeks ago. We have a video of that, and they have lots of documentation online. So if you want to see that, you can also do that. Essentially the idea here being Staker DAO is a regulated entity, more or less, where they will want to issue different kind of investment products focused on the blockchain space. And the first one of them being this blend token, which is essentially a proof of stake tracking token. So it is supposed to like capture the cash flows associated with different proof of stake networks and different validators on these different networks and combine it in one token that you were able to hold. The interesting thing here being there is like lots of different parts to this. There's the staker token holders, which are kind of governing this whole thing, what kind of products are issued, which validators are chosen, how is this buyback working, and so on. So this part of the section here. Actually, it's not the staker token holders actually vote on the council, and the council kind of determines the operations team, if I'm remember correctly right now, instead of how it's displayed here. And then this operations team that is voted into for this governance then implements actually the whatever is decided. So an example would be, right, we say, let's say 50% Tezos, 50% Cosmos, and we stake with these 3 validators, and then actually the Staker DAO ops team essentially makes accounts on these chains, does all the things, and reclaims the rewards and so on. And then every now and then, which is now on Ethereum, so that the blend token would be on Ethereum, and the Staker DAO ops team then has, I think, I'm not sure about the frequency, but essentially every now and then they do like a buyback and burn of this token on Ethereum, where they use kind of the rewards that were made staking on these different chains to buy back the token or burn it. So buy back the token from its existing holders, or burning like additional ones, and by means of burning it, kind of lowering the supply and making it more valuable that way. So that's a really interesting design. It's very much regulated, and Staker DAO has taken a really interesting approach of how to like combine these 2 worlds. So that is kind of the final one that we also include as liquid staking, because essentially it's achieving the same thing, right? This blend token, it would be something that in an ideal world where you have kind of liquid staking on chain, or tokenized stake on any chain, you could build like an index with all this, which is essentially the same thing that blend token does. Yeah, I think that's kind of everything I prepared so far. If there's no comments on this, I guess we can move to what Brian was suggested. See something in the chat. Monthly. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say a few words sort of where this is coming from. I mean, I feel I've gone a little bit back and forth, and I'm kind of like somewhat unclear on, let's say if you look at the Cosmos Hub, what's the best path for the Cosmos Hub? I think on the one hand, you could say, okay, you implement something as a basically natively as a liquid staking protocol. Could be probably delegation vouchers is like the most best option at this point. And of course, the upside potentially is that it's more neutral since it's not tied into a particular business. It doesn't have like another token that captures value. And you know, if there's one protocol, you can pretty much be sure that there will be liquidity around it, and there's not going to be the kind of like, oh, there's 3 or 4 protocols, they all compete and maybe divide the market. So I think that's kind of one option. Of course, the downside is also one downside is because there's not a particular business model associated with it, there's nobody who might have like a huge economic interest in pushing it forward. So I think that's one downside. And you know, on the other hand, you have this more approach where, you know, maybe the underlying protocol doesn't offer that, but then, you know, kind of anyone can go and, you know, create their own solution on top, and we might see, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 different solutions that compete with each other. And, you know, pros and cons to that too, right? Of course, the pro is you might see more innovation, more competition, more experimentation. There might be more choice for users, but, you know, liquidity might be harder to get. If one of those protocols really succeeds and ends up winning, they could potentially have, you know, an outsized influence on the chain, or like, you know, some influence through another token. So yeah, I was just curious what people's thoughts are and kind of leanings towards sort of one direction or the other direction.
Can I start by answering, but I will answer a little bit on another subject. Basically, the way I see it is that the competition is with centralized exchanges. So either we are able to provide a similar level of service in a decentralized manner, or Binance, Poloniex, Kraken, and the others are going to take over this market. I mean, and by this market, I mean the validator market. So the incentive is really to be able to compete with them quickly by offering the same things that they are going to be offering to their users. That's the main point that I see. And from that, we can start, I mean, discussing what type of implementation that with the objective of the implementation is to be able to be somehow more competitive than a Binance or than a Poloniex or than a Coinbase. That's the way that I see it. I don't know about you guys, but that's really the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I very much agree. I do think this is like an existential issue for proof of stake, and I do think that centralized exchange is a massive danger, the biggest danger to proof of stake, and so yeah, I agree.
Okay, so taking it from there, what implementation allows to get to something that could compete with centralized exchanges? Like the objective is to be able to use this implementation to be to build different types of products so that people can use the tokens in DeFi, use them to have more liquidity, etc., etc. From your work so far, what kind of implementation makes more sense?
You asking somebody specific or kind of anyone to?
I was just asking the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the key thing in my eyes to accomplish that, you know, you have to ask, like, what is the thing that actually makes it better to hold the tokens yourself as opposed to staking them, you know, so that it's not just, you're not just like leveling the playing field in that, like, you can do some things now by yourself that you can also do in exchange, but you actually going beyond that, so that people have this strong incentive to basically custody your own tokens, because, you know, they can do things that it's just not possible on the exchange. And I think that really ties into this question of composability, and that you have this, you know, all this great creativity that you see on Ethereum DeFi, right, where people create these different applications that leverage parts of other applications, and then you can do really cool things. And I think a centralized exchange it's just not going to be able to do that particularly well. And so I think that will incentivize people to actually custody their own token. So I think the composability is really, really key. And of course, still you need to have the liquidity around it, because if there's just dozens of tokens that nobody really, I think there are strong network effects around it. So from that perspective, I think having a protocol that's reasonably neutral, but allows lots of people to innovate around it is kind of the key. What do you think? Do you share that, or do you see things differently?
I share that. Actually, I had a discussion with a VC a few months ago, where basically we were comparing what we can do I mean, he asked me a direct question, like why I'm going to stake my coins with a validator instead of doing it with Binance. So I made a slide. I'm trying to find it in order to explain the differences. But basically, I was arguing for liquid staking, but I was combining it with slashing insurance to create the fungibility part. So in terms, the main advantage was really in terms of, on one hand, in terms of cost, if you compare them, and on the other hand, it's all about having decentralized delegations, a more decentralized network governance, which means a more secure network, and hopefully a higher coin price, broader community of builders, etc., etc. So these were like the main results of having or fusing liquid staking. This is the way I was seeing it at that time. But in the meantime, honestly, it remains like this is the long-term impact that we will have if we have all the coins on Binance or on Coinbase. Less people are going to be. I mean, the network is going to seem less secure. There's going to be lower real usage. Less people are going to be building on top of these networks, etc., which will drive the coin price down. So the question is really, are we going to use these networks, or are we just is it just a new bubble based on a tech that is not used? Yeah, at the end of the day, it comes down to this. I feel that it comes down to this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially that that custody on centralized exchange is also just going to mean less usage of the network overall. So I think that's very true. Anyone else have thoughts on this issue?
I guess we can wrap up, or
No.
if no one.
Let's wrap up then, yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, thank you guys. I mean,
That was great, Felix. Really great presentation. It was really nice to see everything distilled in one presentation, like all the work of the last 3 or 4 months. So that's great, and thank you all for attending. Yeah, so the document, the link is there. The link is on Telegram. So please have a look at the document. Please send us your feedback. You know, you can comment in the doc, or you know, if you want to contact us on Telegram or DM us, that's fine. You know, we're happy to jump on a call with anyone who's got feedback or suggestions, and anyone who's working on any of the project teams. If there's any inaccuracies in there, do let us know. We'll fix it up. Or if you'd like, you know, to add more information or make any changes, then do let us know. But otherwise, yeah, thank you everyone for participating on all the liquid staking calls, and we will update the document, get the final version together, and then we'll let you know what the next steps are then when we have the document together. So thank you very much. Cheers, guys.
Thank you for your work.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes.